I don't give a SHT, my daughter Sarah screamed at me, her face contorted with rage. It was the end of a long argument about money, or rather, about her expectation of my money, and her words hit me like a physical blow. In that moment, standing in the hallway of the house I had worked my entire life for, the home I had hoped would be a safe haven for my family, I saw the truth in her eyes. It wasn't love or concern or even disappointment. It was pure, cold entitlement. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe family should protect, not exploit each other. Hit that like button and subscribe for more. I had always been there for my children, Sarah, and my son, David. After my husband, Thomas, passed away 5 years ago, I found myself with a modest but comfortable inheritance, enough to live on, keep the house, and still help them out when they needed it. And they often needed it. David was steady, responsible, but Sarah and her husband, Mark, seemed to lurch from one financial crisis to another. I paid off their credit cards, helped with rent, bought essentials for my 2 grandchildren, Emily and Josh. It felt like what a mother did, supporting her family, smoothing the path for the next generation. I believed in family, in the ties that bound us, in the idea that we lifted each other up. But what she discovered next would force her to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. My life after Thomas's death had settled into a quiet rhythm. I missed him terribly. The silence in the house was often deafening, but I had my routines, my friends, and the comfort of knowing I had provided a stable home for 30 years. The house was paid off, a solid brick ranch on a quiet street. My savings, managed conservatively by Thomas's old financial advisor, provided a steady income. I wasn't wealthy, but I was secure. This security, I would soon learn, was not a comfort to my daughter, but a target. Sarah, in her late 30s, had always been a little demanding. Even as a child, she had a knack for identifying what she wanted and pursuing it relentlessly until she got it. As an adult, married to Mark, who seemed equally adept at avoiding responsibility, this trait had morphed into a sense of entitlement. They struggled to hold down steady jobs, blaming the economy, their bosses, bad luck, anything but their own choices. I initially sympathized. Life was hard, and young families needed help. I opened my purse, first cautiously, then more freely. It was just helping family, wasn't it? They spoke of needing help for the kids, and my heart melted. Emily and Josh were my world, innocent little beings I adored. Their requests grew bolder. First, it was a few hundred for rent. Then, 1,000 for a car repair. Soon, it was regular loans that were never repaid, contributions to bills, even funding small luxuries they insisted they deserved. After a tough week, I stretched my budget, dipping into savings more often than was wise, rationalizing that it was for my grandchildren's future. I visited them regularly, bringing groceries, helping with childcare. I saw their apartment, cluttered, chaotic, often reflecting a lack of basic upkeep that worried me. They talked about their dreams, their plans to start a business, their inevitable future success, if only they had a little cushion, a little help now. I wanted to believe them. I needed to believe them. One evening, I overheard Sarah and Mark talking in their kitchen, not realizing I was standing just outside the door, about to knock. Sarah's voice was sharp, impatient. "She's sitting on all that money, Mark. The house alone is worth a fortune. Why are we struggling like this?" Mark mumbled something I couldn't quite catch, but Sarah's response was clear. "No, not just bits here and there. We need it all. Or most of it. If we could just get her to, I don't know, sign the house over? Or get power of attorney. She's getting older. It wouldn't be that hard to convince her she needs help managing things." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Help managing things? I was perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. They weren't talking about help. They were talking about control. They were talking about taking what was mine. They didn't see me as their mother. They saw me as an obstacle between them and my assets. I backed away silently, my heart pounding, not knocking, just driving home in a daze. This was the first crack in my carefully constructed world of family loyalty. That overheard conversation was just the beginning of a slow, painful awakening. I started paying closer attention, really listening to their words, observing their behavior. I noticed how their needs always seemed to align with expensive wants: a new television, a weekend trip, designer clothes. Their gratitude was fleeting, often followed quickly by the next request. They rarely asked how I was doing, not genuinely. The focus was always on them, their problems, and how I could solve them, usually with money. The incident that triggered Sarah's outburst, the one that led to her telling me to just die, was a culmination of this escalating entitlement. They had asked me for a truly significant sum, ostensibly to invest in a speculative, ill-defined business venture Mark had dreamed up. It was tens of thousands of dollars, a substantial portion of my liquid savings. I had gently but firmly said no. I explained that I needed that money for my own future, for potential medical expenses, for my security. I reminded them of the loans I had already given, the help I had provided. That's when the shift happened. Sarah's tone changed from pleading to demanding, then to furious. She accused me of being selfish, of not caring about her or the grandchildren, of hoarding money I couldn't possibly need. Mark chimed in, calling me unreasonable, saying I was standing in the way of their success. The argument escalated rapidly, culminating in Sarah's venomous words as I tried to leave. I don't give a SHT. The shock was profound. It wasn't just anger. It was a complete dismissal of my worth, my life. It was a wish, spoken aloud, for my non-existence, presumably so they could inherit sooner. Standing there, the coldness of her eyes stripping away years of maternal love and sacrifice, I knew I couldn't stay. Not in that house, not with that constant pressure, not under that contempt. That same night, numb but resolute, I packed a small suitcase. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out the back door, got into my car, and drove to the small cottage I rented out as a vacation property on the coast, a few hours away. It was off-season, empty, and quiet. The silence there was a relief, not a burden. The first few days were a blur of pain and disbelief. I replayed Sarah's words endlessly. How could my own child say that? How could she feel that way? I received no calls from her or Mark, no texts asking where I was, no apologies. My son, David, called, worried. I told him I needed some time away, that things with Sarah had become difficult. David was supportive but lived states away with his own family and wasn't fully aware of the extent of the financial pressure. After about a week, the initial shock began to wear off, replaced by a quiet, simmering anger and a dawning clarity. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being exploited. This wasn't about temporary help. It was about a long-term plan to divest me of my assets. Sarah's outburst wasn't a momentary loss of temper. It was the truth slipping out. I started thinking, not just reacting emotionally. I needed proof. I began documenting everything. I went back through old bank statements, highlighting transfers to Sarah and Mark. I found old text messages where they promised to repay loans or explained urgent emergencies. I screenshot recent texts demanding money. I noted dates and times of their increasingly aggressive phone calls. I searched my house for any documents they might have accessed or tampered with during visits. It felt methodical, like building a case, which, I realized with a jolt, was exactly what I was doing. While gathering documentation, I made a crucial decision. I wasn't just going to hide, I was going to protect myself. I contacted the lawyer who had handled Thomas's estate, Mr. Harrison. He was a kind, older man, precise and understanding. I laid out the situation, recounting the years of financial support, the increasing demands, the overheard conversation, Sarah's terrible words, and their complete lack of contact since I left. Mr. Harrison listened patiently, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Eleanor," he said gently, "this is serious. This isn't just a family spat. This is financial coercion and emotional abuse. Your daughter and son-in-law seem to view you as a source of funds, not as a person. The overheard conversation, the texts, the demands, it paints a clear picture of exploitation. He advised me on my legal options. First, secure my assets. We discussed changing beneficiaries on accounts, reviewing my will, potentially setting up a trust to protect the house. Second, document everything. He stressed the importance of a paper trail. Third, establish clear boundaries, legally if necessary. He mentioned options like trespass notices if they came to my property uninvited, or even restraining orders if threats escalated. He specifically advised against giving them any more money, for any reason. He explained that enabling their behavior only reinforced it. He also advised against direct confrontation without legal representation. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to my house briefly, accompanied by a trusted friend. While there, I systematically gathered more evidence. I found a crumpled note from Mark with handwritten calculations about Mom's equity and quick sale options. I found a printout of my property tax assessment tucked into a drawer where I never would have left it. It was clear they had been snooping, planning. The knot in my stomach tightened, but my resolve hardened further. They weren't just entitled, they were actively plotting. I changed the locks, installed a simple security camera pointed at the front door, and forwarded my mail to a P.O. box. I packed more essentials and returned to the quiet safety of the coastal cottage. The calls and texts from Sarah and Mark started about a week after I secured the house and mail. They weren't apologies. They were initially angry. "Where are you? Why won't you answer? You can't just disappear." Then, they turned manipulative. "The kids miss you. How could you abandon us? We need you." They didn't mention the money directly at first, but the underlying demand was clear. They expected me to come home and resume my role as their personal bank. I didn't respond. On Mr. Harrison's advice, I blocked their numbers on my phone. He suggested communicating only through him, if at all, regarding legal or financial matters. Their pressure intensified. They called David, telling him I was acting erratically, that I might be unwell, implying I was incapable of managing my affairs, precisely what I'd overheard them planning. David, bless him, called me, concerned. I explained the full situation, sharing some of the documented evidence. David was appalled. He had suspected Sarah and Mark were irresponsible, but he hadn't imagined this level of calculated manipulation. He offered his full support. Having David understand and believe me was a crucial comfort. The manipulation escalated. Sarah posted cryptic messages on social media about difficult family situations and people who turn their backs on you. Extended family members started calling me, pressured by Sarah. "Sarah is so worried about you," they'd say. "She says you just left. Is everything all right?" Some implied I was overreacting, that I should just go home and talk it out for the sake of the family. I calmly explained, without going into excessive detail, that Sarah and Mark had made it impossible for me to stay, that there had been severe disrespect and financial demands I could not meet, and that I was safe and well. Some understood. Others remained swayed by Sarah's narrative. I continued working with Mr. Harrison. We drafted letters asserting my sole ownership of my property and assets, detailing the history of financial assistance, carefully phrased as gifts or loans, as the documentation supported, and stating that any further communication regarding financial matters or my property should be directed through his office. These weren't threats, but clear legal boundaries. The turning point came a month after I left. I received a package forwarded from my P.O. box. It was a small box containing some items Sarah apparently thought I had left behind. Tucked inside was a seemingly insignificant USB drive. Curiosity piqued, I plugged it into my laptop. It contained documents and audio files. It turned out Mark had been keeping records, not for himself, but for some unknown purpose, perhaps as leverage or simply bad organization. There were spreadsheets detailing my assets, potential inheritance values, and their projected expenses, with lines like "Mom's death, Q for projection." There were audio recordings, clearly made without my knowledge during visits, featuring conversations where they discussed how to get me to sell the house, how to convince me to add Sarah's name to accounts, and how they could argue I was becoming forgetful or confused to gain control. The audio files were sickening. Hearing Sarah's voice, cold and calculating, discussing my usefulness and planning how to manipulate me, was devastating. But among them was one recording made the day of the argument. It captured the whole exchange, including Sarah's final, chilling words. It was the smoking gun, proof not just of their greed, but of the depth of their contempt and their malicious intent. This wasn't speculation, it was their own voices, their own plans. I immediately took the USB drive to Mr. Harrison. He listened to the relevant audio files, his expression grim. "This is powerful evidence, Eleanor," he said. "This recording, especially with her final remark, combined with the documents showing their financial planning around your assets and life expectancy, demonstrates a clear pattern of predatory behavior and lack of care for your well-being. This could be very useful if they were to pursue any legal action claiming you are incompetent, or if we needed to pursue action to protect you from harassment or financial harm." With this evidence, I felt an immense shift. I wasn't just a victim, I was someone with undeniable proof. My counter-strategy, guided by Mr. Harrison, was put into full effect. Mr. Harrison sent a formal letter to Sarah and Mark via certified mail. It acknowledged the history of financial support, but clearly stated that no further funds would be provided. It outlined the legal boundaries regarding my property and privacy, citing potential legal action if harassment or attempts to access my property continued. Crucially, it mentioned that I was aware of their plans and had evidence of their intentions regarding my assets. Sarah and Mark were clearly blindsided. They had expected me to return, perhaps a little chastened, but ultimately compliant. They had assumed my emotional nature and history of giving meant I would never take legal steps. Their overconfidence was their undoing. The immediate aftermath was a mix of panic and desperation from their end. The formal letter from Mr. Harrison was served. It detailed the evidence I possessed, without revealing the full extent, like the USB drive contents, which we held in reserve. It wasn't a lawsuit, but a firm declaration of my legal standing and intent to protect myself. Their reaction was swift and panicked. Mark called my old number repeatedly, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Sarah sent a flurry of emails, the tone swinging wildly between outrage, "How dare you involve lawyers?" and feigned hurt, "Mom, why are you doing this to us? We're your family." This was the begging the prompt title refers to, not true remorse, but desperate attempts to regain control and prevent legal consequences. Then came the call. It was Sarah, calling my new, unlisted number that only David and Mr. Harrison had. I had given the number to Mr. Harrison for emergencies, but he had not shared it with Sarah. She must have gotten it from one of the extended family members she had pressured. I hesitated, then decided to answer, with Mr. Harrison on speakerphone on my end, though I didn't reveal his presence. Sarah's voice was tearful, bordering on hysterical. "Mom? Oh God, Mom, please don't do this. Please come home. We need you. The letter. The lawyer. What is this? We never meant. We were just stressed. It was a performance." I could hear the forced sobs. She didn't apologize for her words, only for my reaction and the consequences she was now facing. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "I heard what you said. I've seen your plans. I know what you intended." Her tone shifted instantly, the tears drying up. "What plans? I don't know what you're talking about. We just want our mother back. Are you even well? Maybe you need help." "I am perfectly well," I cut her off. "And I have evidence of everything. Your words, your plans, your intentions. You told me to just die, Sarah. You didn't care. And you were planning to take my home and my savings. A moment of stunned silence. Then, rage flared. "You're lying. You're imagining things. You're being paranoid. Mark, she's crazy. She's making things up." I could hear Mark yelling in the background, defensive and angry. "I am not making things up," I said calmly. "Mr. Harrison will handle all future communication. Do not contact me again." I hung up. It wasn't dramatic. It was just finished. In the quiet aftermath, sitting in the peaceful cottage, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. The legal letters had done their job. Sarah and Mark understood I wasn't going to be easy prey. They knew I had evidence, though they didn't know exactly what. Mr. Harrison handled the few follow-up attempts at contact, shutting them down firmly. There were no lawsuits filed by them claiming incompetence. My documentation and Mr. Harrison's readiness clearly deterred them. My property was secure. My finances were protected in trusts, making them much harder to access. Sarah and Mark faced the consequences of their actions not just legally, but socially. When some extended family members learned the truth, particularly David shared some of the milder evidence, enough to show the pattern of demands and lack of care, support for Sarah and Mark evaporated among those who valued integrity. They found themselves isolated, their reputation tarnished within the family circle. I didn't return to live in my old house immediately, eventually deciding to sell it and purchase a smaller, more manageable property in a different town, closer to the coast. This new home was entirely mine, unburdened by the painful memories and associations of the past. I created new boundaries, impermeable walls built from hard-won wisdom. There was no contact with Sarah or Mark. The relationship, shattered by their greed and cruelty, could not be rebuilt. David remained supportive, and our relationship deepened. I had lost the illusion of a perfect, supportive family, but I had found something more valuable: self-respect and peace. I had faced betrayal and responded not with despair, but with quiet strength and strategic action. I was safe, independent, and no longer saw my generosity as a weakness to be exploited, but as something to be given discerningly, if at all. The quiet hum of the waves outside my new window was a constant reminder that life, like the tide, moved on, bringing both loss and new beginnings. My future was mine again, protected by the boundaries I had fought to establish. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.